Hey, cat fans, please accept my gratitude for attending my talk, which is called Making Love or Shaping Affectionate Behavior in Under-Socialized Shelter Cats. Thank you so much to Olivia Cison and the rest of the folks at the IAABC Foundation for giving me a chance to speak at Pounce this year. I am so honored and excited. My name is Melissa Taylor. I'm the Behavior and Training Manager at Friends for Life Animal Shelter at Houston, Texas. I am a certified behavior consultant canine knowledge assessed from the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers, and I'm a CSBC through the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, which means I'm certified in the behavior of shelter cats. I've been in shelter animal behavior for 20 some odd years. And I am so lucky to be part of Friends for Life, which is home to a senior leadership team that greatly supports our comprehensive and forward-thinking behavior and training program. In this presentation, we're going to cover the Frady Cat program at Friends for Life, which is essentially a program for remedial socialization for very fearful cats that prepares them for adoption. We're going to talk about our selection process for the cats who go through our program. And the meat of the presentation will go step by step through the progress of a cat in the typical way that they progress through the program. And lastly, we'll wrap up with some post-training logistics that you can do to ensure the success of the adoption of these fearful cats. This is Friends for Life Animal Shelter in Houston, Texas, where all the Frady Cat magic takes place. We are a limited intake shelter, which basically means that we hold on to all of our animals until they find homes. This means there isn't a tremendous pressure to get them out by a deadline, but it also means that we invest a lot of team hours in enrichment, management, training, and sometimes behavior modification to maintain a decent quality of life. With such an emphasis on training and behavior, you can imagine that it's costly from a staffing perspective. And yes, we do have folks who are full-time and trained in behavior and training, but especially for our cats, we really rely on the generous donation of time from our behavior volunteers. Our behavior volunteers, of which we have 250, are participants in an in-house tiered program that helps volunteers who start off with absolutely no experience in animal behavior and works them through the program until they may qualify to be certified as behavior consultants. Through the program, they specialize in different areas of shelter animal behavior, such as enrichment, in body language, in learning theory, in getting novel behaviors from animals, and consulting. And while they learn about all these topics, they practice on the animals in the shelter, on our fosters, adopters, and members of the public. So you can imagine just how much they help our shelter and the animals. We could not do it without them. One of the areas that we find the behavior volunteers assist us greatly is in our Frady Cat program, as they help the cats generalize that people are sources of great things like treats or play, and maybe even affection later on in the program. Our Frady Cat program was started in 2018 due to just this tremendous call for help from either members of the public, other shelters, and rescue groups for their cats with behavior issues, especially their very fearful cats. We wanted to come up with a formal way to get fearful cats through the program and into adopters' homes that was cat friendly. So it would incorporate choice and modern training techniques. So we didn't want to force cats to endure petting. We didn't want to pet the cats while they were eating, because those techniques just aren't appropriate. We also wanted to give an alternative, a humane alternative to cats like Piper here in this photo, who was a cat who was an owner surrender at a municipal shelter, who wasn't doing well in the shelter. She was extremely fearful and difficult to handle. And the shelter was about to release her to the outdoors, despite her having no experience living outdoors. She was always a house cat. So rather than let her face that fate of being released outdoors, we enrolled her at the shelter. And within a week, she had completed the Frady Cat program and she was soliciting affection from her handlers. And then within 2 weeks, she was adopted. Here's a video that shows a series of clips of a cat named Pooh, who was a warehouse colony cat who was not completely socialized in his rescuer's home when he came to the shelter, and he had no history of friendly behavior towards humans. This is a video that was featured in an article in the IAABC journal in 2020. So these examples of training are from a couple years back, and there are a few updates. But I would highly suggest, if you're interested in the background of the program, that you check out this article. It's called Another Way Out in the IAABC journal 2020. So one of the first steps in Pooh's training was to get him to take treats so that we can reinforce eye contact, to use the eye contact as a default or start button behavior for exercises like counter conditioning. So in this clip, when Pooh makes eye contact with me, I follow up by touching or jiggling the kennel door and then give him a treat so he can associate my reaching out and touching the door with treat. Through that counter conditioning of the door opening, I was able to eventually open the door and work in free contact with Pooh. So here I'm reinforcing eye contact. The eye contact we can use for a whole host of counter conditioning exercises. So in this clip, I've already used auto shaping to teach Pooh to target my finger. And auto shaping, I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on, is not shaping by successive approximation exactly. It's pairing of two stimuli to elicit certain behaviors. So that's how I get Pooh to touch my finger. We'll talk about it more later because it's something that we do with very many of our Frady cats. But before I do any targeting with Pooh, he makes eye contact. So I only extend my hand when he first makes eye contact. In this section, Pooh is targeting my crooked finger, and I'm using strategic reinforcer placement to get Pooh to touch my finger. And I want to say this is something that we wouldn't do right now because I feel like it takes away choice from the cat, even though Pooh responded really well. So you can see here when I show my hand to him, he targets my crooked finger with the top of his head, and he gets paid with some churu. But again, we've updated our practice, so we don't really use this kind of luring as much as we did back then. So at this point, because Pooh will target my finger, I can now scratch his head and pair that scratching with treats. So we can counter condition the contact to the top of his head. And again, he initiates each trial by making eye contact. You can see that he's starting to lean into the touch, which is a sign that he's starting to enjoy petting for petting's sake. In this clip, you can see that he's clearly enjoying petting, and he's soliciting the petting by making eye contact. And I think he also meows at me too. So at this point, he's graduated from the Frady Cat program. When a cat has solicited affection from more than one handler, then they've graduated from the program and they're ready for next steps. So I've always wanted to show the folks who saw this video in conjunction with that IAABC journal article, what happened to Pooh after? And here's my chance. So once Pooh had graduated from the Frady Cat program, we moved him to a free roam cat room. So he got 24 hours of free roam time. Before, he just had free roam time a little bit each day. But here he was able to move about freely and look out the window, get that natural light. And he had lots of visitors in our behavior volunteers to do cooperative care training and crate training with him. More than anything, he had training to be able to generalize that every person could do some training for treats with him, and eventually he would solicit affection from each person. And the goal was to expose him to as many different kinds of people as possible in a very ritualized way, so that eventually, when he did have a visitor who was a potential adopter, like this lady, he would solicit affection in the first meeting, which he did. And then here's a video of him at home, which warms my heart every time.
Such a good boy. Oh, you're such a good boy. Oh, so sweet. Oh, so cute. So loving. Say hi. Hi.
So how does a cat go from a warehouse feral to a cuddly house kitty who loves to host visitors and get pets from them? Well, I'll tell you. The first thing we do is we identify appropriate candidates for their program. And here's a flow chart that we use to decide who would be a good candidate. The main thing to remember is that our first priority is if the cat is doing well outside, then we're going to make sure that the solution is rather to trap, neuter, and return them to their colony, because we don't want to subject them to undue stress. So the cat is doing well outside, they should stay outside. If the cat is not thriving outside because of their health, maybe they're injured, maybe they're ill, or maybe it's not a safe environment for them, well, that cat is potentially a candidate for Frady Cat. Also, if a cat has been brought indoors from a colony and was living indoors for more than 12 weeks, that is potentially a candidate for the program. And then lastly, we have cats who are indoor cats, but maybe under socialized or doing poorly in either our shelter or another organization. Here are two examples of Frady cats who made good candidates for the program, and we'll follow their journey through the program in our step-by-step training process. So Owen was a 4.5-month-old kitten when he was found. He was in a colony, and one by one, the other cats from his social group were being killed because he lived on a very busy street. There were only the two of them left, Owen and his sister Prem, and they were taken into a rescuer's house where they were fostered for a month and a half. During this time, Owen never showed friendly behavior towards the rescuers, and they were not able to touch him. He fled from them whenever they reached for him. He was a great candidate for the program, just given his age and the fact that he couldn't be returned to any colony safely. Jingle Bells was a 5-year-old FIV positive cat who was transferred in from a rescue group where he'd been living for 19 months, mostly under a bed. And he never showed sign of social interest towards people. In fact, on his intake form, his foster wrote, "Jingle Bells is very timid and shy, lives under the bed, but with time ventures out and allows foster family to be around. We cannot touch, pet, pick him up, or get near him before he runs." They also wrote that Jingle Bells was scared, timid, and unapproachable, and that he was currently not adoptable. But they mentioned in the form that they believed that he had promise, and if anybody could work with him, that we could. And I really have to give them kudos for reaching out for help instead of letting him languish in this inhumane situation. Long before the cats set paw into the shelter, we set them up for success by preparing them for their move into the shelter. Of course, we get an extensive history of the cat, and we also make sure that they are thoroughly vetted to rule out any physiological cause for their behavior. At the discretion of our veterinarians, we might have them put on behavior medications. And we also kind of do a scent exposure to the shelter. So we'll send some bedding home with them if the cat is living in a foster situation already, so that the cat can smell the bedding from the shelter laundry, and it's not a huge shock for them when they come to the shelter. We also have the foster of the cat, whoever has the cat before they come into the program, send some bedding in with the cat so that they have some familiar scents with them at the shelter. And we make sure that we have the cat stay in a Frady friendly space, which means it is closed off to foot traffic. Of course, we don't have members of the public walking through, and we also don't have staff and volunteers walking through as much as possible. It's kind of a private, quiet area with natural lighting, and there are hiding spaces throughout the room for when eventually when the cat has out time. And speaking of out time, in the living space of the cat, they have access to the ground floor exit of their kennel so that they can freely go in and out without somebody having to touch them to get them in and out of the kennel. So they have that choice of exiting the kennel for out time. Speaking of the kennels, the smallest kennel that we use now for our fearful cats is the Ultralight 360, which is 75 inches high, 36 inches wide, and 31 inches deep. It's shown here in this photo. And this kennel can be configured to provide 1, 2, or 3 levels of living space. And all of our Frady cats have the option of moving from one floor to another, which means they can be on the ground floor if they want to, but they can also climb higher if that gives them a feeling of security. On the day of the move into the shelter, their living space has been stocked up with all the essentials listed here, and these essentials are spread throughout their living area. And they've got a choice of bedding, they've got a choice of food items, which is really helpful to teach us about their food preferences later on. They've got multiple perches and scent enrichment, of course, their familiar scent item from home. And we cover the front of the kennel with this red and white polka dotted towel, which lets our staff and volunteers know that this is where a fraidy cat is living, so people can be extra quiet and not disturb them. It also is a reminder to spot clean only, which we do with all of our cats. It just means that we clean only when necessary. You know, there's like vomit or feces or something in the kennel, but we don't, take all of their bedding out and wash it and replace it, because that wouldn't be ideal from an olfactory point of view. So at this point, we're not doing any active training. We're waiting for the cats to be eating regularly. They're being monitored by our ACS and wellness team. And it gives us an idea of their food preferences for when we do actively start training. At this time, let's talk about the focus of our fraidy cat training. We really try to incorporate choice throughout the training for the fraidy cats, because this reduces the stress of the cats. There's so much out there that shows that incorporating choice into training reduces stress. So we want to do that as much as possible so we can have the cats get through the program as quickly as possible. Here are some ways that we incorporate choice in training. I talked already about free roam time. We want to make sure that as soon as the cat is eating well and they are comfortable with us opening the doors to their kennel, that they can have time to, explore the room on their own, to look out the windows and climb and visit different hiding spaces and play. We also give them the choice of opting out of training sessions. So if we approach a cat and they're hiding in their cubby or they move away, then we just leave them alone. We don't want to force them to participate in training. We give them choice about treats, not just the type of treats that they get, but how we give them treats. I'll show you a couple of videos later on that give you an idea of ways that we do this. We give them alternative activities to training. So we may provide them with a foraging toy with the same treats in it that they could earn through training. So if they would prefer, they can use the foraging toy and get the treats that way, or they can interact with us and get trained and get the treats that way. We also teach them multiple default behaviors. So if you remember from the video with Pooh, I had captured eye contact with Pooh and used that as a default behavior. But nowadays we capture or shape multiple default behaviors, and it gives the way the cat to communicate to us their preferences. So they can, for example, make eye contact with us if they want to follow up with a counter condition exercise, or they can like make biscuits, which is one of our typical default behaviors, and they can earn a treat directly that way. So I'll show you more about how that works later on. And lastly, way down the line, when the cat has graduated from fraidy cats and they're soliciting affection, we make sure that all of our staff members, all of our volunteers, and even our visitors are coached about getting permission for contact before they touch any animals. Here is a video of a fraidy cat named Cardamom early in her training, and it shows two ways that we allow her to have choice in her day-to-day life at the shelter. So in the first way, you can see me enter the room, and not only are the doors to her kennel open so she can leave if she wants to, but I wait for her to come out of her cubby hole before working with her, because I'm not going to come up to her and work with her in a space that's closed off where she feels trapped. Hey, Cardi, for work today? So she comes out of her space, and this kind of bottom of the top half of her kennel space is where we work. And in this part of the video, I'm showing how she can opt into receiving the treat by looking at the treat. So basically, if I had flick the treat towards her, which is my default way of getting treats towards the fraidy cats, she wouldn't eat it. She didn't prefer that the treats be flicked towards her. She also didn't like it when we used a treat station that was away, like a little bowl. If I put the treat in the bowl, she wouldn't go towards the bowl. But what we're doing here is showing her the treat. And if she looked at the treat in my hand, I would move the treat towards her slowly. If she looked away, then I would stop the progress of the treat. Or if she disengaged, I would take the treat away entirely. So you can see that I'm going to offer her the treat and slowly move it towards her as she's looking at it. But if she looks away, I stop the progress of the treat or move it away a little bit. I realize that it looks like I'm just giving a cat a treat, but if a cat takes a treat really easily, they're likely not a true fraidy cat. That's the main difficulty in working with the fearful cats, is initially getting them to take appetitives. Here's a video of Puma, who was a fraidy cat who had been trained a couple different behaviors like eye contact and chattering. So he could offer either of those behaviors as default signals. And what we did was we gave him the choice of how he would have the treats delivered to him. So he could make eye contact and have the treat delivered to his mouth directly, or he could chatter and the treat would be put on the mat in front of him. And in the beginning of this preference training, he could make eye contact or chatter pretty much equally. And he would always get the same treat, which was tuna flavored churro, which is the only one that he would eat. The only flavor that he preferred was the tuna. And he would make eye contact or chatter pretty much equally. But after the third session like this, he was almost exclusively chattering. And that meant that we were exclusively putting his treat on the mat in front of him. So you have to listen pretty carefully because the chattering's super quiet. So now you have an idea about how we incorporate choice into our training with the fraidy cats. And the data is still out, so I will know in a couple months how this has impacted the speed at which we get cats through the program. But I feel really good about the fact that we are now getting our cats through the program faster than we ever used to. So when we first get cats in, they are often frozen at the back of the kennel, or they may be lunging and hissing at us and threatening us. So they're not taking treats. And that, I think this is the most difficult part of working with very fearful cats, is getting appetitives to them and for them to enjoy. So how do we do this? This is where people mostly mess up. So they will either force pet the cats if the cats are not accepting food, or maybe the cats will eat because obviously they don't want to starve, and the person will force pet them while they're eating, which is also not acceptable. So what do we do? But what we do is use choice. So let's circle back to the idea of choice. So think about what these cats initially want when they come to the shelter. If you're a very, very fearful cat, somebody you don't know comes into the room, the first thing you're going to want is for the person to move away, get away, because that person isn't safe. You're not going to want them to come closer to you and give them a treat. It doesn't matter how delicious the treat is if this terrifying predator is approaching you to give it to you. So that's what we give to them. We move away whenever they offer a specific behavior. So at the time of this poo, when we made the poo video, we were negatively reinforcing blinking. So we would come to the kennel as far away as we could, wait for the cat to blink, and then leave, essentially negatively reinforcing blinking. And I learned two things about this. Negatively reinforcing blinks works very, very quickly when cats really want you to go away. Just a couple trials and the cat is immediately showing very deliberate blinking towards you. But the second thing I learned is that cats can keep their eyes open for a very, very, very long time, longer than me. So I would find myself having difficulty keeping my own eyes open. And when I blinked, I was always worried that I'd missed the cat's blink. So what I changed since then is I look for any small signal, any small behavior that the cat does, and I'll negatively reinforce that. So I'll start by being as far away as I can from the cat. So maybe I'll just crack the door and peer in. And in this situation, Jingle Bells, for example, would just kind of just shift his body weight a little bit away, and I would leave. So I would just peek in, he would shift his body weight, and then I would leave for at least 20 minutes to give him that security that he earned by moving away. And then he really, really quickly learned that I would leave him alone as long as he just shifted his body weight. I'm not going to wait until he ran away from me, because you don't want to negatively reinforce fleeing, because that's what you're going to get for a very, very, very long time. I want a very minimal amount of stress and a very, very whatever behavior the cat's going to do right away to save that long exposure to a stressor. So once we did that, I was able to gradually get closer and closer to Jingle Bells as he let me get closer before offering his body weight shift, until I was able to give him treats. And you can see in this video just how much less frozen and more interactive he was after this negative reinforcement training. And in this video, I think I'm reinforcing eye contact, but you can see just how engaged he is very early on in the training. I think this was after the second session. So not all cats present this way right away. Sometimes we get cats who are a bit ambivalent. So here's Owen. Whenever I came into the room, Owen would jump up onto a perch, stare at me, and hiss at me. And again, it's not really the appropriate time to walk up to him and give him a treat, like a lot of people would be tempted to experiment with. So instead, I was negatively reinforcing when he jumped up onto the perch. So I would come in, he would jump up onto the perch, and I would leave before he had a chance to do anything more than that. And very quickly, this happened within the first 3 trials, he would start to delay jumping onto the perch, but he would give me a chance to instead walk towards him slowly. and he would let me get closer and closer before jumping onto the perch until I was near enough to pass a treat towards him. So at that point, this is what that looks like. So when he was away from the perch, so you can see there's no cat visible because he's not on the perch, I passed a piece of salmon to him and then I left. And then some time would pass and he would take the salmon. So I was here attempting to pair my approach with the salmon. So what we're looking at is the little opening between the two polka dot towels, and you will see that Owen appears there and climbs up to get the treat. Here he is. He collects the treat. And then when he jumps down again, then I walk up very slowly and I deposit another treat there onto the perch. So basically I approach, I'm watching very carefully that he doesn't jump onto the perch, which would tell me to run away, and that he's not staring at me or showing any other distance increasing behaviors. And then I think in this trial, he jumps all the way up onto the perch to collect the treat. And basically, there is less and less time that passes in between when I deposit the treat and when he collects the treat. So in the beginning, it maybe took a couple minutes between when I deposited the treat, like 2 minutes. I would come and drop a treat in there, 2 minutes would pass and he would jump up and get the treat. And then by the end of this training segment, as soon as I was putting the treat down there, he would jump up. So you can see he's meowing at me and really much more engaged than he was initially. And here he jumps up almost right away to get the treat. So in this video, you can see as soon as I put the treat there, he's already on the perch. And I think I'm stuck there because I wasn't expecting him to jump up quite so quick. But ideally, I would move away whenever he came to collect the treat. The treat down there. I'm still moving slowly because I'm really watching for any distance increasing behaviors, including staring or hissing, or I want to make sure that I know when I can move away. So now that he's taking treats reliably, I can start charging a bridge. So we all know what that traditionally looks like. You would click, in this case, I'm tongue clicking, and then give a treat. So click and then give a treat. So the click predicts for the treat. But in this case, to make sure that the click isn't scary to the cat as much as possible, I'm going to simultaneously give a treat when I click, just for the first couple trials. And I'm really carefully watching his body language, because if it's too scary, then I'll want to hold off doing that. You can see I'm doing the click simultaneously with the treat. And then I'm going to gradually make it so that I'm clicking first and then giving a treat. So this allows us to start capturing desired behaviors. So in this video, I know it's hard to see because I haven't opened the curtains fully. I'm capturing eye contact. So basically I'm just standing really neutral and silently, and I'm waiting for him to make eye contact with me, and then I click and treat. By the way, you can find all of these videos on our YouTube channel, so you can just watch them at full length because I've just cutting them short now in the interest of time. Okay, so here's an important point. This video kind of shows the future. I just wanted to show a video with the curtain open so you could see what I'm doing, but I'm capturing other behaviors, which happen to be pro-social behaviors like rubbing or making biscuits. It's important because we want to give him another option of earning the same treat to the default behavior of making eye contact. So invariably, the cats start to show some kind of signals that you can use to shape into pro-social signals. So for example, they start to make an association between you and food. And when you come up to them, they start to stand tall. So you can capture that. And that, often that standing on toes can be shaped into making biscuits. Or they spontaneously start rubbing on things when they know you have food, and you can capture that. And that turns into bunting. You'd be surprised at how quickly this happens. This is just the second training session, judging from my outfit. In this stage, since I have a default behavior and I've also captured some other behaviors, I'll start to counter condition him to associate me opening the curtain with treats. So I'm going to wait for him to make eye contact. And when he makes eye contact, I'll reach towards the curtain and give him a treat. Now he can offer the other behaviors and that would earn him a direct treat. So I won't be doing the counter conditioning exercise after he rubs on some things. I think he might do that over here, where he made some biscuits. So he gets a direct treat that way. Or he can make eye contact with me and then I'll reach towards the curtain. Eye contact right there. Once I've opened the curtain, I'm going to start to use auto shaping to train finger targeting. So auto shaping again is not shaping by successive approximation exactly. It's pairing two stimuli. So for example, the presentation of my finger and the presentation of treats. And with repeated pairing of the presentation of my finger with the presentation of treats, eventually he's going to build an association between these two events. And then when I present my finger, he's going to act towards my finger the same way as if I had presented him with treats, meaning he would move towards my finger and eventually touch it. So here's a series that shows how he's making eye contact with me to start off the trial. I show him my finger. He doesn't have to do anything. I just give him a treat. So he makes eye contact. I show my finger. He gets a treat. The next day, he was already moving towards and touching my finger. So that works super quickly and consistently. This is a process that we use with the vast majority of our Frady cats. We're also going to counter condition opening the door so that our cats feel comfortable with us reaching towards the door and moving it, because up until now, they only associate the door with, scary hands coming in and moving their things around, emptying the litter box, refreshing their food, which many cats would welcome normally, but for the Frady cats, that's potentially threatening. But I really want to, as soon as possible, get Owen ready so that he can be given out time every day. So notice that I'm opening his downstairs door so that that's going to be the door that he's going to use to get in and out of the condo. So in this case, he's making eye contact with me, and then I'm going to practice moving the door around just the same way that I counter conditioned the opening of the curtain. And from then on, he could have regular out time, which he enjoyed immensely. He had huge parties whenever he was allowed out and just running around and climbing and just being a kitten, which is amazing to see. I want to say too, at any time, he could also offer other behaviors like rubbing up on something or making biscuits, and I could reinforce those behaviors directly without following those up with counter conditioning the door. Okay, so lastly, once we are able to work more with the cat in free contact, we start having them target our finger, but many of them automatically start bunting up against us because we've already spent a lot of time capturing those prosocial behaviors. And so that behavior generalizes, it spreads to other behaviors like touching our fingers. So they often immediately start rubbing up against us. I want to say that most of our cats going through the program will automatically at this point start rubbing on our hands. So in this exercise, Owen is making eye contact with me, and then I open the door and I put my hand inside the enclosure. At first I was showing his finger like I would did a target, but he immediately started rubbing on me. So, he didn't read the protocol. So he doesn't follow it by the letter. So this is the third session, and it's within a week, which I think is amazing. Remember, this cat was for 6 weeks in a foster home with a very hands-off foster who wasn't going to force pet him or anything. And he was still very fearful and did not want to be touched by that person. And in just 3 sessions, he is bunting up against my hand. I wish we could show this to everyone who is convinced that force petting works fastest. Makes eye contact and open the door, and then he immediately rubs against my wrist. So just 2 days after I had this success with Owen, I got a video from one of our animal care specialists, Tanya, who, by the way, doesn't do any of the Frady cat training. She was, cleaning his space and feeding him, but he spontaneously solicited affection from her, which is just amazing. But it happens with our younger Frady cats that they just easily generalize between people. So he has officially graduated from the program because he solicited affection from more than one person. So he was moved to a free roam room, and he right now is enjoying the company of other cats. And he also continues to solicit affection from us in free contact. And he's working on ritualized meetings of our behavior volunteers so that he can generalize to solicit affection from different people. So that's a typical progress of a cat through the program. But what happens when the cat doesn't automatically solicit affection? So you remember this cat, he's Jingle Bells, a 5-year-old FIV positive cat who'd been living at another rescue organization for 19 months without showing any friendly behaviors towards people, and he was hiding under the bed. Well, he went through a lot of the same training that Owen did. So he was started taking treats after the negative reinforcement phase. He was making eye contact. I had captured some pro-social behavior. So actually I'd shaped them. So he was standing tall and with a high tail. He was rubbing on things, making biscuits, and he did well with his counter conditioning, the door opening, But when it came to auto shaping the finger targeting, I noticed that even though I was giving him distance, when I showed my finger, he would get stiff and pretty aroused. I didn't feel safe doing that. I checked his records and I saw that he had a history of biting. And this is not uncommon when people try to socialize cats by force petting them, because the cats learned that the best way to make the creepy humans' hands go away is by biting them, right? Because we are going to pull away. And that behavior gets quite impervious to extinction because it's negatively reinforced by the strangers moving away. So I abandoned that route of training and I started to play a game with him called 100 Things to Do with a Human. So many of you probably already know this game called 101 Things to Do with a Box, which is a game from Karen Pryor, which she uses to get novel behaviors from learners before shaping. And I thought that if I could just capture behaviors in these cats who are afraid of hands, and of course I'm keeping my hands away, I'm capturing various behaviors that the cat shows towards me, eventually they will show contact behaviors towards me. So this is something that we do when our cats are quite afraid of hands or have any history of aggression towards people. And it works super consistently to get them to feel comfortable with our hands, eventually petting them. So at this point, I'm clicking and treating whenever Jingle Bells does anything near me. This is the very first session of 101 Things to Do with a Human. So he can walk past me, he can walk towards me, he can sniff me, he can look at me, he can biscuit towards me. Any of those things earn a click from him. So this video, I warn you, is a bit long, but it's totally worth it. So keep watching. So remember, I've already captured kneading his paws. So that kind of prepares him to show this behavior more when we're playing this game. I should say it's very, very difficult to deliver treats when your hand is stuffed in your lap. Aha, success. And just in the second session of the game, he starts making contact. And here he rubs me again. You can't quite see in the back. What I love is that it's just this avalanche. Once he's made contact with me and he's nothing bad has happened, he continues to do so again and again. At this point, I started shaping direct interaction with my hand, but I'm keeping my hand covered by my sleeve. And so for these cats who are afraid of hands, once we can get them to interact with a covered hand, we can just kind of slowly fade in the naked hand. In this series, you can see later on how he responds when my hand is uncovered because I accidentally overexpose him. So you can see that he truly is afraid of hands. So you can see now how much he makes contact with me after those 101 things to do with the human sessions. Okay. So once our cats have solicited affection from more than one person, we've graduated them from the program, and like Pooh and Owen, they get to move to the free roam room and they get to generalize that people are safe, strangers are safe. So we train stranger rituals. This process is featured in a PPG talk that I did for last year's Geek Week, and I highly recommend it because that is the main way that these cats go on to meet adopters. They also get crate training and cooperative care training. So for example, here is Cheetah, and he's doing some nail trim training with one of our volunteers, Jennifer. There's also a lot of stuff outside of training to make sure that Frady cat adoptions are successful. We work really closely with our amazing adoptions team to make sure that they know which cats are in our Frady cat program so they can keep adopters apprised about which cats need that special attention, because we don't want to frustrate adopters. We want to make sure that they are fully advised about the cat's behavioral history before they start to get emotionally invested. Our adoptions department also gives our adopters written material about the Frady cat exercises. They tell them about them verbally. They get links to the videos just so that they can see what the exercises look like. We demonstrate them in person, and we also have the adopters practice those exercises because we want to make sure that they continue on working with the cats when they go home. They also get a handout that delineates the entire process of what they can expect when they take home a Frady cat. We also have behavioral goals. So we actually ask the adopters to give us their goals so that they can reach those goals before they finalize the adoption. For example, in this photo, we have Princess, and or it's actually, her name was Precious, and Precious's adopter's goal was for her to sit in their lap. So we worked on Precious being able to get into their lap before they finalized adoptions. And sometimes when the cat doesn't warm up right away to the adopter, we have home visits so that we can make sure that we do a reintroduction process that will help the cat acclimate more smoothly to the adopter's home. And of course, we do regular check-ins, 4 days, 1 week, 6 months, and every year post-adoption, we send them a text message asking them what problems they might be experiencing with their pet, so that it does not leave the ball in the court of the adopters. We make sure to proactively follow up with them. So wrapping it all up, ad nauseum the details of the Frady cat program, but if you want to know more, check out our article in the IAABC journal and the Geek Week presentation from 2021 Geek Week from PPG. When I wrote the title of this presentation, Making Love, it was tongue in cheek. It's just because everybody says, well, you're just bribing the cat or you're paying them for behaviors. You're not really forming a bond with them. But remember, when we go back to the way we incorporate choice into the lives of these cats, think about how here's Jingle Bells. I've put a whole bunch of treats in his kennel so he can earn those same treats by going into the kennel that he can when he's interacting with me. But yet he chooses to stay out with me to interact. So here I'm putting Jingle Bells up. He's got his same treats in the kennel. I'm getting ready to close the door, but he's like, oh, no. He comes back out and he continues to rub up against me. So he can get those same treats for free in his kennel, but instead he comes out and rubs up against me. And in this case, he doesn't even earn the treats. He just gets to rub up on me. So, I mean, maybe it's not love. I don't know. What do you think? I know what I think. I'm looking forward to your questions after this presentation, but if you don't think of them until later, please feel free to contact me at melissa@friendsforlife.org. Thank you so much again for coming to my presentation, and enjoy the rest of Pounce. Yes, we have an SOP. It's largely, it's very similar to the article from IAABC 2020. I think somebody put a link to it. If not, remind me and I'll post a link. and with some updates, like we do allow out time a lot sooner than we used to. We do multiple behaviors, like default behaviors, so they can choose what they want to do and so on. There's the scent exchange. So there's some updates since 2020, but generally it's the same as this article. Also, we do work with shelters directly because just from the understanding that not all the shelters are the same. And in fact, we are not the same as we were back when we started this. So, for example, we didn't have a special quiet room for Frady cat training, and we had to work in the hallway, and we still had a great deal of success. So, and I've worked with shelters who cannot turn down Frady cats, so they're not allowed to TNR. There's some places in the world where TNR is illegal, and they just have giant piles of Frady cats in the shelter because they cannot also, behavior euthanasia is not allowed in some shelters. So yeah, I've worked with all kinds of shelters. I hope you got my email. If not, I'll put it again in the chat so that you can contact me.
Yeah, we can definitely put that in the chat for people. So how many people work at Friends for Life for comparison purposes?
How many people work here? It's like about 20 something, low 20s. Low 20s. So we're pretty small.
Okay. And you kind of answered this at the end, but we're going to answer it again. Do you offer any follow-up support for adopters of these cats?
Yes, we do. And it's super, super important because the adopters are generally not professional animal trainers as much as we want them to be. And then also there's that huge transition to the home. So what we do is our adoption department they have that pre take home, all of that education they do where they give the adopters reading material and so on. They make sure that the adopters know what they're getting into, and they don't pull any punches. They tell them like it is, that it could take weeks for the cat to come out and solicit affection, because the adopters sometimes get tricked. They get tricked. So they'll come to the shelter. The cats are really practiced at soliciting affection from strangers. So they'll come in and then the cats will be like, I love strangers, rub, 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 purr, purr, purr. And the person doesn't believe us that it's a fraidy cat. Oh, that's not a fraidy cat. This wasn't a feral cat. Even though some of our cats have a documented history from very young that they haven't had any, they haven't solicited affection from people. But when they go home and the behavior team's not there and they're in a completely different environment, then they do take a setback. So we keep in touch with the adopters. We keep in touch with them 4 days, then a week, and then a month, and then 6 months, and then every year after. But I mean, it's usually much more frequently than that because we have them establish behavioral goals that they want to meet with that animal so that we can help them get there. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, the answer is yes, lots of follow-up support.
What were the measurements for the Ultralight 360?
Okay, it's 75 inches tall, 36 inches wide, and 31 inches deep.
How do you infuse shelter scent to bedding you send home for scent exposure to the shelter?
That's a good question. So we don't do anything special aside from just launder it in the shelter laundry, but this is bedding that's been sitting in the shelter. So I've thought about using some, synthetic feline facial pheromones or like a valerian root spray, but I didn't want the bedding to smell too strongly when it went home with them. So far we're just using regular shelter laundry stuff that's clean. I was thinking when I was hearing my talk over again, I was like, gosh, I hope that people don't think I'm pulling dirty stuff out of laundry.
You guys, she's sending home dirty laundry. That's how they afford it. Do you utilize any of the specifically composed music products, like through a cat's ear, in the housing areas?
We do occasionally, but I don't purposefully play through a cat's ear in the fraidy cat areas. Sometimes we'll use some white noise or brown noise, but we generally don't. It's very quiet. I mean, we're in the shelter here. You can see, of course, we're going to hear something as soon as I say it, but you can see that it's relatively quiet in the shelter. So it's really important for us that even though our volunteers do provide some auditory enrichment, that there are quiet times.
How much does age influence a cat's suitability for the program? So, like kittens, especially, some sources advise to return them if they're over a certain age.
Yes, that's a super question. So the most important thing that we care about is whether or not the cat's able to thrive outdoors. So our enrollment team will look and see, what's going on. Like with Owen, for example, you can actually see he's over here. I don't know if you want to have a peek at Owen from the video. Hey, Owen. So with Owen, at his age, he was about 6 months when he was enrolled in the program. We probably would have let him be, except that his colony mates were getting killed one by one. So it was a high risk situation for him. But it wasn't so much his age that was important. It was more, whether he was thriving outdoors. Does it make sense?
I mean, to me, it does.
You're
But
the
I'm
one.
not the one asking.
Well, ask again though. Ask again if I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, we'll see if something comes up in chat. Do you have any means and protocol to socialize cats to other species like dogs or rabbits?
We do, because we get a lot of inquiries for our cats from adopters who have other animals. So not just other cats, but also dogs and rabbits. And yeah, I mean, we just do the slow kind of counter conditioning, desensitization, introduction with them, but happy to share protocols if you want to email me. And I should say that I know it sounds like there's tons and tons of cases, and there are, but I'm not the only one who does them. We have a couple behavior technicians, and we have behavior volunteers who do our consults, who do many of our consults for
See the
us
dirty
with
work.
cats and dogs. So, yeah.
Okay, so what is the average length of stay for a cat that was in the Free to Cat program?
Oh, that's a tough question. So I'll have to look and get back to you about the length of stay for the fraidy cats in general. The last time I checked, well, actually, the first time I checked, it took 12 weeks to get a fraidy cat through the program, on average. So that, mind you, it includes cats like Jingle Bells, who was, in fact, most of the cats in our fraidy cat program back then were more like Jingle Bells, who had spent lots of time living indoors, but they were community cats who did not have much of a history interacting with people at all, just mainly for feedings. So we had those pretty tough cases, and now we're enrolling. We've kind of broadened our definition of what the fraidy cats are so that we can help more cats. The general length of stay for cats in the program is not in Fraidy Cat, just in Friends for Life in general, is 90 days. And the amount of time it takes now on average for cats to get from the beginning of Fraidy Cat to when they're soliciting affection from their main caregivers. So I just looked at the data a couple of days ago. I don't want to give numbers because it's only been a couple months since we started we had rebuilt the entire back of the shelter in part to accommodate our fraidy cats and be able to serve them better. But there's a huge improvement. There's a huge improvement. I want to say like really close to having the amount of time that it took to get the cats through the program. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's a lot faster than ever. And the cool thing is that if people are are willing to adapt the program to their programs in their shelters, it probably will be a lot more desirable to them now that we can get the cats moving through the program so much more quickly.
All right. So some cat experts say chattering means that a cat views a person as prey, or at least in a negative way. In your one example, it seems as if you view chattering as a good thing.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I could see that how you could think of chattering as a negative signal. But to me, as long as the cat was offering behaviors and was looking relatively relaxed in his body language, then I was going to accept it. Also, once Puma was, he went through the program and he was soliciting affection, we moved him into the free room. It was clear that from his body language that he was not looking at me or any other people as prey. He was just kind of offering the chattering as a way to earn his treats, his tuna churros, which after a while, I'm so pleased to say he branched out beyond tuna flavor. So
Nice.
happy ending. And he also got adopted really quickly with another Frady cat.
Aw.
Yeah.
So same example. Did he choose the chatter because he preferred chattering, or did he prefer the treat placement on mat? Or maybe that doesn't really matter because the point is he's got good choices.
Yeah, so I can't tell you really what was going on in Puma's mind, but before I decided to do this preference assessment, I would just feed him regardless of what he did with the churu to his mouth, right? So he would make eye contact with me silently, or he would chatter, and either way, he would be able to lick churu out of the tube. But then I decided to conduct this experiment. Oh, yeah. So back then he was doing it 50-50. When I was only paying him to his mouth, he would do it 50-50. And then when I made it so that when he just made silent eye contact with me, he could lick the treat directly from the tube, or if he chattered, he could take the churu from the mat. Only then did he start to increase the ratio of chattering to eye contact. And I have the video on the YouTube, so I'll share it with you. I mean, obviously, I know you, Crystal, so I can send you, I can email that to you, or you've probably seen it already on our YouTube. But if anybody else wants to see it, you can go ahead and email me, or we can share our YouTube channel, however one does that, and and you can see it. Warning: it's not high quality video, but you can see before and after.
All right. So when doing negative reinforcement exercises, do you use any verbal marker before leaving?
I do not, because that early on in the treatment, I'm not 100% sure how they would feel about any marker that I made. So I'm super silent and I can leave really fast. So, I'm like I'm by the doors. I'm basically cracking the door open and it doesn't take me long to get out. So I don't feel I need a marker just then. I only start using a marker once the cat is taking treats reliably, just like I did with Owen.
Do you think that the cat being in a kennel helped with getting closer as opposed to the cat being in a room such as a foster might use?
Yeah, I think that it's possible if you don't have your room set up in a way where you can see the cat. So I think that it could be really helpful to have the cat free in a room. And if we could, we would have a kennel-less shelter, because I do think that having the choice to move where they want is really helpful at speeding cats through the program, which is why we let the cats have free roam time pretty early. But the problem is, if you have a bunch of stuff lying around, like in this room, this is not where we would start the Frady cats, because there's crap everywhere in here, and I wouldn't know where to see the cat, right, in order um, to notice behaviors to negatively reinforce. So I've worked with cats who were just in a room. Um, in foster or in an adopter's home, or we sometimes work with members of the public who don't have animals from our shelter. So I've worked with cats who are just in a room, not in a kennel, and I think it works really well as long as you can see the cat right away so that you can notice behaviors to reinforce.
So I think this is a good one. How do you deal with cleaning the litter box or feeding while you're in the negative reinforcement phase?
Good question. So the answer is that I generally don't do the scary stuff. I am I've uh, differentiated myself from other folks at the shelter, and I also don't do any of that scary stuff. I also make a sound when I come towards the door of the room that other folks don't make, and they don't copy for whatever reason. Maybe they're too embarrassed to make my special sound.
You have to demonstrate that sound now, though, right?
Okay, just because it's pounce, I'm going to try to do it. So I go like that when I'm outside of the door, and everybody else doesn't do that. And so it could be a safety signal that I'm not going to come clean their space.
Can you explain the choice of blinking in the negative reinforcement example? I have the understanding that slow blinking is an affiliative behavior. So if you train it as a go away mark, wouldn't it affect later communication between the cat and his adopters if they see the blinking as an I trust you, you can approach me sign?
Absolutely. I can see that happening. And I gave quite a bit of thought to it. Um, so So in the beginning, the cats use the blinking as a way to get you to go away. And what turns into behaviors that are taking place for negative reinforcement, as the cat learns more control over you, you can start positively reinforcing it. So if anybody's read James O'Hear's book, I think it's Aggression in Dogs or Aggressive Behavior in Dogs. It's kind of a classic. It's something I think that behavior consultants should read, because he talks about these processes, how negatively reinforced behaviors eventually, when the animal has control over the aversive stimulus, they can become positively reinforced behaviors. But that said, I also advise the adopters that later on we positively reinforce eye contact. And you can always tell the difference between fraidy cats in our shelter as opposed to the normal cats, because the fraidy cats are always looking at you like this to solicit things. So, like in the video with Pooh, when he solicits affection from me, when we've moved him to the free room, you can see he's looking at me, looking at my hand. So they do slow blink. I want to differentiate too the blinking for negative reinforcement with the slow blink, which just looks morphologically different.
Can you repeat the name of the book and the author?
It's James O'Hear, and it's Aggressive Behavior in Dogs, or Aggression in Dogs. And now somebody's gonna know it. Oh, Vanessa's gonna find it.
Perfect. We'll come back to it when you have an answer. Is everything in a room where there are no other cats? So like all the training.
Generally speaking, everything happens in a room where there are other cats, but we try to get as much of a history as possible to know whether or not these cats would prefer to be around other cats wandering around. Because, for example, with Owen, who's doing something really cute right now. I mean, it's so silly. He's just playing with a feather, but obviously I'm in the right job because that's super cute to me. But so Owen loves other cats. We knew that he loved other cats because the person who originally fostered him, she noticed that he was showing some affiliative behaviors towards her cat at home. And so when I was working with him, I would have other cats out. But we do have some fraidy cats that, either through their histories or when we have them out for out time, we don't get the feeling that they would do well with other cats. At least for their training, we keep the other cats away. But yeah, we've had a lot of good experience with having helper cats model pro-social behaviors around our fraidy cats.
How do you handle necessary vet exams or medications during the program? Does it ever hinder the progress?
So this is why so yes, it has really hindered our progress in the past. And this is why whenever we enroll Frady cats, we make sure that we send them to out to get thoroughly examined as much as possible, radiographs, blood work, whatever the vet wants to do to rule out anything before they get into the program, because we don't want to be like 2 weeks in, and then suddenly we realize the cat has like a dislocated shoulder or something, and that the cat is really showing these behaviors because of pain. So we really make sure that they're as thoroughly vetted as possible, because we have had some terrible experiences.
Okay, so when utilizing negative reinforcement for the beginning stage, do you limit who interacts with the cat? When thinking about how to utilize this in our large open admissions shelter, it would be difficult to ensure every staff member is doing the same thing and slowing down enough when they're so rushed to get everything done.
Yes, I've worked at municipal shelters before, so I totally get it. So yes and no. So we don't limit who kind of does the day-to-day caring for the cat. So, changing out the litter box and feeding them and so on. But nobody else aside from myself and our higher level cat behavior volunteers can work on the cats at that level until they've graduated from the Frady Cat program and working on generalization, because we're really wanting to be very consistent. So, so that's why it's so important for us to differentiate ourselves between the trainers and then the folks who are going to be caring for the cats.
Okay, so this is a multi-pronged question, so take it as it goes. Lots of logistic questions. How many cats do you work with on any given day? How often does it take to work with each cat? How long does a round of working with select cats take? And how many staff or volunteers work with the same cats within one day?
Ooh, Allison. Okay, so how many cats do I work with? So me personally or our team? Because I know myself, so we have 6 Frady cat slots in the back of our shelter, which are the slots that are meant for active training for cats who have not graduated. So they're in between when they've been enrolled and the pre-treatment phase to when they solicited affection from their main handlers. So we have 6 slots for those cats. And so I work with those cats every day. But also I work with the cats who have graduated. So definitely 6 cats. And because I work in the shelter and I also see, I teach classes and I see inter-shelter consults to help other shelters and all the other things. I'm not 100% sure how often I get to work with the graduated cats, but once the cats have graduated, then we have all of our behavior volunteers, and the behavior volunteers. So, at each level, they're working with a different facet of the care of our Frady cats. So, in level 1, they're working on the cat's enrichment. So they're providing them with day-to-day enrichment. They may be at level 2, letting the cats out for out time, and we have a way to log when the cats have been out, so to make sure that every cat has been out every day, and if they're not in a free roam. And then we have the level 3 behavior volunteers. They're working on mechanical skills and training, so they're doing a lot of training with the cats, like training them for crate training or cooperative care training. Wait. So sorry, I got off track. That's a lot of questions. How often does it take to work with each cat, or how long maybe? It really depends on what I'm doing. So if I'm doing the negative reinforcement treatment for the cats, I'll do one cat, and then in the inter-trial interval, that gives me plenty of time to walk around at the back, or walk around to all the cats who are actively in Frady Cat. Um, So it's hard to say, but I don't recommend working with the cats for more than, depending on the exercise, for more than 15 minutes at a time. So you could see with the 101 things to do with a human, I was sitting there with Jingle Bells for quite a long time. But for the counter conditioning, the curtain or the door or auto shaping, that really only takes, 2 or 5 minutes at a time. How long does a round of working with select cats? I'm not sure I understand that question.
I think there's another question that kind of also addresses it, so I'll pop that up here.
Okay.
So you said the intertrial time during the negative reinforcement phase was 20 minutes. How many trials might you do in a session?
So it's at least 20 minutes. Of course, we're in a shelter, so I might be called away to do something else. So it's at least 20 minutes. I ideally would work each cat 4 times in a day, because there are so many cats. And I guess a session would be a day. So maybe four trials in each session.
Okay. Do you think rest days are important? For example, days where you don't do behavior modification, but maybe just do enrichment?
Um, I don't incorporate rest days because I have days off. So generally, when I'm off, they by default get rest days unless they've moved to the free roam rooms and the behavior volunteers are training them. Um, I guess the thing is, if they are opting into the training, I want to be clear that our training sessions allow the cats more than one ways to earn the specific reinforcer. So in that last clip with Jingle Bells, the entire time I'm working with him, he can get the same treats in his kennel. He could just go back there. He also could get his same treats from other spaces in the room because he didn't always pick them up, or there were some in a foraging toy. And so he always wanted to interact with me. you know um, he doesn't he never elects to do anything else if I'm in the room aside from interact with me. And it's the same with the cats. In fact, once we have a whole bunch of cats in Frady cats in a room, and we have cat training days, cat training Tuesdays, where all our behavior volunteers come in. All the cats are just swarming over the volunteers because they'd much rather do that than earn their treats from foraging toys the or just the ones in the dishes in the room. So I don't think that I don't know if the cats would be on board with rest day.
How do you modify the Frady Cat program if you have a cat who is less motivated by treats? Do you have other creative reinforcers?
Generally speaking, when the cat doesn't take treats, it's usually because they're not comfortable to take the treats in front of you. Usually. There are very, very few cats that prefer other things. And most of the cats, once they get to a point where we know them well enough that they can show their preference, it's direct interaction with people. For example, with Owen, his reinforcer of choice turns out to be petting. And like with many of the Frady cats, once they've graduated from the program, we do occasionally use play, but it's so rare. It's so rare. They always eventually are able to take treats. I wonder if it's because we keep such a close eye on their food preferences in the pre-treatment phase. And we also don't pester them with treats. I early on in the program, when I first started testing out Frady Cat, I would, try all kinds of treats with them. And if they're truly this fearful, you're harassing them. You're really making them terrified. If you try the tuna and the churu and the party mix, and you try that every day, every single time that you come up to them, you're terrifying them. So I think the best thing to do is really just pay really close attention to what their choices are in terms of texture and flavor of the treats of the food that they're eating, and then if the cat is eating, dry chicken, poultry flavored food, then you're going to try the crunchy chicken treats. If they're eating like the fishy wet food, then you're going to try, like salmon, like I did with Owen. So we don't get a lot of cats who just won't take the treats. And this is after hundreds of Frady cats. So I say that with a lot of confidence.
How quickly do you move to counter conditioning the door?
As soon as I get a couple behaviors that the cat's offering, like eye contact and anything that the cat's going to do, I'm going to try to capture that, because the goal is to get them out of the kennel as soon as possible. So soon as I can do it.
Okay, and then going along with that, during the session, you showed where you're getting him used to the door opening. Do you prevent him from coming down to the lower shelf, or is he allowed to come down if he wants?
Yeah, he can come down. He could leave if he wants to. So the portal was open between upstairs and downstairs, but because I was so consistent about putting the treat upstairs, he was staying upstairs, but he could come downstairs. And even though most of the videos, because they were close up, didn't show it, once I had counter conditioned him to the door being opened, the door was open all the time when I was working with him. Like in the video with Owen where he solicits affection from me, all the sound in the beginning is me opening the downstairs door. So if he wants to, he can run out.
Has moving them ever made them regress and they started hiding in the free roam room?
Yes, absolutely. It happens. And that's why it's so important to get quite the rapport with them before you ever move them. So we make sure that whoever develops that bond with the cat when they're actively working their way through the program also spends time with them when they move into the free roam room. But because of that, because we make sure to help them transition, we don't have any trouble with them hiding anymore. So this has happened before. Maybe we were not as careful about having the person that was the main handler for the cat kind of go with them to the main room and spend time with them in the main room, in the free roam room. But now we do that, and fingers crossed, we haven't had an issue with the cats hiding.
For 101 Things to Do with a Human, do you mark the same behavior over and over again, or does the criteria for the click increase as a cat gets more confident?
So there's a really good article and countless videos on 101 Things to Do with a Box. I really recommend checking that out. That's on clickertraining.com by Karen Pryor, the article. And basically, I follow more or less the same idea. In the video with Jingle Bells, I'm trying my best, even though my hand's like shoved in my between my legs. I couldn't deliver the treats like I really wanted to. I would have delivered them further away. So in the article that Karen Pryor wrote, she was sometimes tossing the treats into the box. I didn't want the treats on me. I wanted the treats kind of a ways from me. In the beginning, I was just taking whatever he would get. So if he had offered the same behaviors over and over, I would have taken them at first. But once he'd done that a few times and he was looking still very relaxed, then I would have waited to see if he tried something else. And it's just eventually you're reinforcing novelty. And I, as I remarked in the video, I had first captured and shaped some desired behaviors like the biscuiting and the rubbing on things and the walking around with a high body posture and high tail. So it was sure that he was going to offer those behaviors around me and on me at some point. So I was kind of hoping that he would go that way. So even though in the beginning I'm just marking and reinforcing for novel behaviors, eventually when he starts showing that he's walking by me, then I'm going to start more selecting for behaviors that are closer to closer to interacting pro-socially with me.
And then along with that same video, when he was overexposed to your hand and moving away to sit, what criteria were you looking for before marking and treating?
I was just going to take anything that he did. And he was such a good partner. I feel like he's quite a training partner, these cats. Like once you have the rapport with them, and he did such a favor to me, even though I overexposed him, he moved away, he sat and he offered biscuits. But I should have marked, I don't know, actually. I'm thinking, if I had marked the sit, would that have been okay? I think that would have been fine too. I think anything that he was doing, because by sitting, he was also communicating with me. But he was so kind to me that even though I didn't mark in a timely fashion, I get flummoxed just like a lot of imperfect trainers. He offered some biscuits to me, so thank you, Jingle.
Jingle Bell was very popular, so we have lots of questions for him. So he would get up and move about you. What about those cats that simply freeze in the presence of humans? Then what do you do?
Well, that's what Jingle Bells was. He was a type of cat who, if you went in there in the very beginning, he would be in the hiding box in his room. But I'm very hesitant to go into the room when the cats are at that phase. If you notice, I didn't get a lot of like pre-treatment phase photos because I don't want to go into their space. But yeah, he's not the type of cat that you could just go into the room and he would interact with you. So he would just be in his kennel hiding, or he would be on top of his kennel eventually and just, so he was the cat that would be frozen in front of people, and they're ideal for negative reinforcement phase. And what we're going to do in the future is, in the very, very near future, is we're going to be using security cameras, like wireless security cams, so that I can reinforce behaviors that are out of sight, that would typically be out of sight for me. So, they've got the curtains up, they're in their hiding boxes, but the camera catches behaviors like the shift in the weight that I can just respond to whether or not I have direct eyes on him. So this will be really exciting to see how this affects the amount of time that the cats go through the program, because until now, I really relied on what I could see.
All right, we have time for one last question, but I know a lot of questions are in there and are at this point going unanswered, which I apologize for, everyone. But I did pin Melissa's email address in the chat, so you can reach out to her if you need to. So last question, how do you ensure that the operant behaviors you're teaching that solicit affection are not coercion?
Okay, that's a super question, because we want to always avoid forcing the cats to show us behaviors that they're not comfortable with in order to get a reinforcer. So by coercion, I take it to mean when the cat has no degrees of freedom. So by that, I mean that they only have one way of earning what they want. So for example, if I were to withhold food from a cat and then they had to work with me to earn the food, of course I wouldn't do that. But if I had the tuna churu for Puma, but he could only get the tuna churu by doing one thing, or things that he didn't want to do, that would be 0 degrees of freedom. So the more routes we give the cat to earn the reinforcer at hand, whatever the appetitive is, so that tuna churu, there should be more than one way to earn that. Or for Jingle Bells, he had more than one way. He liked temptations. He's not a very not a very fancy guy. So, he could earn those temptations either by interacting with me. There were treats lying on the floor. There were treats in a foraging toy in the room, but also treats in a pile, a shamelessly large pile of temptations in his kennel. So he could go to any of those places to get the very same thing. What's so interesting about Jingle is that, so sometimes he would have treats on the floor, I would leave him free roaming in the room, go work on other cats. I would come back into Jingle. He would still have the temptations on the floor. I would sit down and he would immediately start showing me behaviors to earn the very same kind of temptations that were lying on the floor when I was gone. So, I mean, that's, yeah, if that's not more than 1 degree of freedom, I don't know what is.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Melissa. This was a really fantastic talk. I think it was really compelling and got a lot of discussion from everyone. So yay. So we're going to let you go ahead and enjoy the rest of your night. Anyone, I'm going to keep talking for like 10 more seconds so you can copy down her email address if you need to.
Thanks, Beth. And thanks to everyone for coming. And I hope that if you didn't get your questions answered here, that you feel comfortable emailing me or, hit me up on any of the professional group social medias. I'm afraid that I'm only on Facebook, which is really sad because I'm that old. But anyway, hit me up. I wanna chat with you about Fraidy cats.
Awesome. And for everyone else, we do have one more talk left for you tonight. So join us back here in just a few minutes for that. And we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.